evening. Welcome to the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education Committee of the Whole meeting of January 11th, 2016. This is a committee of the whole meeting, and just so that you're aware of what types of activities will take place at this meeting, there will be a lot of discussion of various items that the board has got to take under consideration. We will also be having a presentation by the Livonia Career Technical Center, who are so graciously hosting us at their facility this evening. It's always a lot of fun for the board to come out and be in buildings as opposed to being in the board office all the time. So I'd like to thank the Career Technical Center and the staff for hosting us so graciously this evening. The discussions that will take place among the board members this evening may be asking the administration to get more information for us. They're typically fairly lengthy conversation in a great deal of detail. However, there will not be any votes taken tonight. Committee of the Whole meetings are designed for us to flush out a lot of ideas, questions, answers, and so forth. However, our voting will take place at our general meeting, which will be next Monday night at the board office. I'm sorry, next Tuesday evening, rather, a week from tomorrow at the board office. I believe it's the 19th. So if you're looking for votes, those don't take place tonight, but if you're looking for a lot of good discussion, you've come to the right place. If you would like to follow along with an agenda, they can be found at the counter just over near Mr. Anderson. Also, if you'd like to participate in audience communications tonight, you can find some blue slips over there. If you'd fill one out, we'd be appreciative of having a record of your attendance this evening. The first item on our agenda this evening is audience communications. I do have 3 blue slips of folks who would like to speak to the audience. Just so you're aware what audience communication is designed to do, it is a time that the board has set aside to listen to concerns of our community. It is not a time for us to get involved in questions and answers back and forth. The reason for that is we are not sure what anybody might be discussing this evening. We may or may not have all the information. So it is a time designed specifically for the board to listen to the concerns of the community. If it's a topic of the board, you may get a response back from the board. Frequently, if it's an item that deals with day-to-day operations, you may get a response back from the superintendent or someone in the administrative positions in the district. We do also have a 3-minute time limit on our audience communications, and that is so that we can make sure we're being fair to everyone who would like to speak to the board. We ask that everyone honor that. We do have a timer that'll go off, so we don't have to interrupt you. If you hear a timer going off, you'll know that you've hit your 3 minutes, and if you could wrap it up, that would be appreciated. Our first gentleman who would like to participate in audience communications this evening is Mr. Doug Coates. Mr. Coates?
Good evening. How you guys doing tonight?
Great. How are you?
Good, thanks. Good evening, board members and superintendent, of course. Tonight, we want to bring to the board's attention a problem that has reached the point where we feel we need to bring it to the board in a public meeting. As you're aware, the teaching staff in LPS has taken and made a great deal of sacrifice in the last few years to help the school district deal with the cuts that are imposed by the state. But we've reached the point where we especially feel like the teachers that are in their newer part of their career are feeling a great deal of strain, and the morale in the district is low. These teachers in particular are questioning whether they can make further investment in their careers and in their LPS classrooms because they don't feel the investment back from the school district. I believe myself these teachers are working too hard to make ends meet for what they do for the district. I know you value them. I know that you appreciate the district's employees. I don't question that. But I think some of the examples that you see from what our teachers are doing is something that maybe you're not aware of. For example, do you know that if a teacher was hired in 2008, they're making $2,035 more than they were when they were hired 7 years ago? That's a lot of sacrifice. If you were at a job, where the take-home pay was up 5% over 7 years, that would question your ability to stay in that job, I think. Although we don't have statistics, we believe the anecdotal evidence shows that more teachers are working second jobs than ever before. And when I was coming up through the teaching ranks, just as everybody expects when you work at a job, you gain experience, you gain increased skill. That was certainly true for me. It's still true for myself today. When a teacher is leaving their classroom to go to a second job, I believe that professional growth is stunted by that, having the need to do that. I think that Livonia Public Schools needs to be a place where a teacher can put down roots and feel like this is a career for them, as opposed to just a second job. And I think that sadly for some of our teachers, particularly those that are in the early part of their career, that is not the case. There is definitely a teacher shortage looming. You can see that in the fact that fewer college graduates are coming out in education. You recognize it in the difficulty that LPS and other school districts have in maintaining and retaining and recruiting people in specialized certifications. And you can see it also in the experience that districts are willing to pay for some positions. I believe it's imperative for LPS to provide salary advancement for our teaching staff, particularly our newer teachers, so that you don't lose these people to other districts or other professions. Thank you much.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. The next participant in audience communication is Erica Reedy. Good evening.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Oquist. Tonight I would like to share with you some examples of teachers in our district or who are doing, quite frankly, what they're doing to make ends meet. A colleague of mine with 3 children is working as an Uber driver on the weekends and coaching throughout the school year and summer. Working these extra jobs takes away time he could spend with his children and time he could use to grade papers and plan for classroom activities. Another colleague in his mid-30s with 11 years experience and 2 years with the district has to work construction during the fall, spring, and summer months. He has just spent $2,000 to take a class he needs to keep his certification. Both of these teachers are seriously wondering if they should continue investing in their chosen careers. It is expensive to keep a teaching certificate current. Most teachers in LPS have earned a master's degree, and many have participated in Galileo or have continued their education to specialize in specific areas. The bottom line is teachers are beginning to feel they cannot afford to continue working in Livonia. Many of my colleagues, including myself, are tutoring after school, working summer jobs, and taking temporary holiday jobs. It is acknowledged that teaching goes beyond a 40-hour work week, and the workload of a teacher has increased substantially. Teachers chose to work in Livonia because the district has a solid reputation, and they assumed it would provide them with a sustainable income to buy a home, raise their children, and keep their certification current. For many of these, it also meant living in Livonia. I watch my colleagues struggle, all of whom wonder if they will ever move up the steps. The question many are asking is why the district does not recognize and invest in the experience of their teachers. It is discouraging, and no doubt discouraging to the future of our younger teachers and those who are contemplating the profession. When I left Detroit Public Schools to come to Livonia 15 years ago, I knew that each year I would move up the steps, reflecting my experience and knowledge. I felt the district valued and invested in those working directly with students. Morale is low. It's very low right now. Livonia Public Schools needs to invest in their teachers, both to retain excellent teachers with experience and to attract the cream of the crop in new graduates. There's really no question about that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person who would like to participate in audience communication is Ryan Tracy.
Hello.
Good evening.
President Burton, Superintendent Oquist, members of the board. My name is Ryan Tracy, and I'm here tonight both as a teacher and a concerned parent. First, I'd like to give you a little background on who I am. My dad's side of the family sent 5 members of their family through Livonia Public Schools and through Franklin in the 70s and 80s. I myself attended Hayes, Frost, and graduated in 2001 from Franklin High School. 5 years after graduation, I was blessed to land a job in my alma mater, and for the past decade, I've continued to do my best to impact the lives of students who have come through my room. However, the journey has been far from easy. My wife and I bought a home in Canton in 2010. Nothing extravagant, and it needed some work, but we knew that the schools were excellent and we were planning for the future. We knew that the first couple of years might be tough, but with the promise of wage advancement, we knew the future was bright. Then came the pay freezes, the furlough days, the lack of steps, and health insurance. I picked up a second job working weekends starting in February and full-time through the summer and August. I work about 18 hours a weekend leading up to the end of the school year. I never dreamed that I would have a full-time teaching job with a master's degree and I would have to work another job to live something close to a middle-class life. I continue to hold this job to this day and to help support the yearly loss of income I'm experiencing as a teacher. For example, we received a half-step raise this past year, but with the increase in insurance, I'm actually making less than the previous one, a disturbing trend for the last 5 years of my career. Simply put, our future was on hold, and we had to downsize and move out of the home we had bought together, cross the threshold as husband and wife for the first time, and brought our baby girl home too. It's hard to describe the feeling of telling your wife that you need to move out of the house that you created so many firsts in. As we began to look for more affordable housing, we began to look at places with good schools because we knew that we'd be staying in it for a while. While Westland, Wayne, Redford, and Ipsy all fit the budget, we knew that we wouldn't be happy with the school system, so Livonia was definitely the logical choice. I know the type of teachers that I had and the impact they had on me, so I wanted to give my daughters the same opportunities. However, especially at the high school level, many of the best teachers, who I now call colleagues and friends, were in the very early stages of their careers. I would hate to imagine these influential people in my life leaving such a rewarding profession because they couldn't make ends meet. I probably wouldn't be sitting here today in front of you. And that is my concern for my 2-year-old daughter, who is sitting in the back room, and my other daughter that is on the way. I want to make sure that Livonia is willing to show that keeping young, talented teachers is a priority. I don't want my daughters to miss out on wonderful role models and great experiences because those young future teachers have either left or never entered a profession that shows so little economic promise. Our own shared vision statement says, as an exemplary school district, we operate on the premise that a school district can only be as good as the people it employs. Therefore, we have a deep commitment to holding the highest standards for ourselves and others and providing the opportunity to learn and grow. Please show the citizens of Livonia that you will live up to this promise and do everything you can to compensate exemplary teachers with a living wage and keep them a part of Livonia Public Schools for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda this evening is our curriculum committee. Mrs. Laura, your chair.
Thank you,
Go ahead.
President Burton. We have 2 items on the curriculum committee agenda today, and our first item is the school presentation. And as President Burton said, we would like to thank Mr. Anderson and the staff for hosting our meeting. We always look forward to visiting schools and hearing about the schools and their wonderful programs. So, Mrs. Ellis, would you like to begin the introductions?
I would be very happy to do so, Mrs. Laura. Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Every year, several of our schools have an opportunity to share with the Board of Education their school improvement plans, their school improvement efforts, and the tremendous work that they do to educate all of the students within their schools. This year, we've put a temporary hold on those school improvement presentations because the results of the 2015 M-STEP, which was administered this past spring, just were released to the public this past December. And so our schools haven't had a chance to look at their data. In fact, the interactive reports still are not available for our schools. So until our schools have an opportunity to dig deeply into their M-STEP results, begin to analyze those results and make some modifications to their school improvement plans, we're going to continue to put a hold on those presentations until later in the school year. However, for tonight, we do have a school presentation for you this evening. Mr. Joe Anderson, the principal of the Livonia Career Technical Center, is going to share with the board highlights of the Career Tech Center with you. You're going to hear a couple of aspects of school improvement presentations. You're going to hear about staff demographic data and student demographic data, and you're also going to hear a little bit of information about assessments. But the bulk of the presentation will be about the programs at the Career Technical Center, as well as how enrollment in those programs can help students fulfill some of their Michigan merit curriculum requirements. So I'm very pleased this evening to introduce Mr. Joe Anderson, the principal of Livonia Career Technical Center, and also thank him for his gracious hospitality in hosting tonight's meeting. So Joe, the presentation is now yours.
Thank you very much. So, good evening, Superintendent Oquist, Board of Education members, and cabinet members. We're very pleased that you decided to change venues and come and be with us tonight at the Career Center. We're excited to share a lot of great information about programs and things that go on here, and hopefully some new things that maybe you haven't heard before. And with me at the table this evening, I have Mr. Dan Yowell. He is our language arts teacher. He is our school improvement chairperson and advanced ed chairperson. He is our literacy consultant, and he is also a literacy consultant for Wayne County RESA. So he wears many hats here in the building and in the county level. And he's going to help with the presentation when we get to the more academic part. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the Career Center staff members that are with us tonight. I don't think we can turn the camera around, but if you're a member of the staff here, please stand so we can see who you are. I think we got a good representation. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming out this evening, supporting us. First thing I'd like to do is share a little bit with you about our students and the student demographics that we have. Certainly, as you know, we have the majority of our students come from all three of our Livonia Public School high schools, but we also have students from Northville High School, Plymouth Canton, other surrounding parochial and charter schools, as well as some homeschool students. The vast majority of our out-of-district students are from Northville High School. We have around 95 Northville students that attend the Career Center, and 105 total this year out-of-district students. Our total enrollment at the Career Center is about 875 students, which is up from 750 last year. So we made a real nice jump in enrollment from this year to last year. So we're happy about that. And juniors and seniors are the group that can come to the Career Center. It's for upperclassmen and elective courses, and 70% of the students that are here are actually seniors. So it's their last year at school. So our mission here is to make sure that we provide students with the knowledge and skills that they will need to be college and career ready. That's kind of our major goal. And as you may have heard, CTE, Career Technical Education, is in the news, and it is something that is pretty hot right now. The demand for skilled trade workers in the state of Michigan is high and projected to grow through 2020. And 38 of the jobs listed in the Michigan Hot 50, which all of you have a copy of in front of you, of those 50, 38 of them actually have a direct connection to CTE. So we think that that's one of the reasons we think that CTE education is so important. Moving on to talk a little bit about our teachers and professional staff. One of the things that makes us very unique in the world of education is our staff, is our instructors. They have a range of expertise and certification experience that goes above and beyond even a normal teaching position. Every single one of our teachers here at the Career Center are certified teachers with valid teaching certificates, but they also are certified, licensed, or degreed in the areas that they're teaching in their program area. And they've also worked professionally or are working in their field of expertise. For example, all three of our pre-nursing, pre-medicine teachers are RNs. Our criminal justice teacher is an active police officer for Northfield Township. And our construction trades teacher is a licensed builder and contractor. And we think that that combination really enables our students to have a great experience while they're here at the Career Center, and we're very, very proud of them. Moving on, talking a little bit about our programs. We have over 25 different classes that we offer between first and second year students. And again, board members and cabinet members, you have a program catalog in front of you that has detailed information about all of those programs and all of the different advantages and certifications and pathways that those classes can bring. So when you have an opportunity, you can take a look at that. All of our classes are 2 or 3 hour block classes, so the students are here for a third or a half of their day, which gives them a good time frame to be able to dig in and spend a lot of time and do a lot of hands-on activities and projects. All of our programs are housed here at the LCTC building, except for our hospitality management program, which is at Franklin High School. They run the Patriot Inn, and I think probably most all of you have been there for a delicious buffet meal at one point in time. So other than that, all of the programs are here. Another unique thing about CTE is the funding sources. We have 2 unique funding sources that are specific to career technical education. One is 61A, which is more commonly referred to as added cost. These are funds that come from the state, and the state requires that 90% of these funds that they give the school district be used specifically for CTE. And here we use these funds to buy equipment, hardware, software, curriculum programs, materials for the classrooms, field trips for the students, conferences for the teachers, and other enhancement and enrichment items for the classrooms. I have left the classrooms open this evening. I'm not sure how long the meeting is going to go or how interested you are in the national championship football game that kicks off at 8:30 this evening. But if you would like to stay and look at the classrooms, you are more than willing, and I would give anybody a guided tour that wants to see the building that hasn't been here. The other source of funding that comes that we get comes from the Carl Perkins Grant. This grant has been in existence for many, many years, and we use the money that we get from the Perkins Grant to fund our language arts and mathematics teachers, as well as 3 of the paraprofessionals that we have here at the Career Center. All right, Dan, moving along to graduation requirements. Last year, the state changed some of the graduation requirements to encourage and enable more students to take career technical education classes. As I had mentioned, career technical education is popular right now, and there's a real need for it, and the State Board of Education saw that, so they gave a little bit of leeway and enabled students here at the Career Center to garner some more of their graduation requirements, and you as a board approved some of these changes to help us out. So a student who comes to the Career Center for one of our classes automatically earns their 20-hour online requirement. They earn a health credit if they take one of our health science courses. If they're a senior, it can qualify as their senior math credit if they don't want to take another math class at their home high school. And it also includes the credit for visual performing and applied arts for all of the students. And the main changes that came about were the state also now allows for the CTE courses to fulfill the requirements for the second year of world language and for a third year of science. Now, this obviously isn't for all students, and the high school counselors and I work very closely to make sure that every student is getting the exact program that they need to go on to the college or career that they want. But it certainly opens doors for students and helps students to be able to come here to the Career Center to take classes. Student outcomes, next up. So, as Mrs. Alice talked about, we do have some assessments that we give here at the Career Center. There are some standardized assessments that the state requires us to give in some areas. One of them is the National Health Science Exam, and this is the exam that all of our pre-nursing, pre-medicine, medical occupation, and sports medicine students take at the end of the year. And just to give you a little idea of how we've been doing, in 2013-14, 65% of the students in the state passed the test. So you pass the test with a 70%, and that's competency. So at the state level, 65% passed, and at the Career Center, we had 72. Last year, the state bumped up to 68% passing proficiency, we bumped up to 74. So our students are doing very well and are sitting pretty far above the state average on that exam. The other big one that our students take from the business department, and all of the students that take business courses here or CTE business courses at our high schools take an exam from the National Occupational Competency Testing Institute, which everyone for obvious reasons refers to as NOCTI. So the business students all take the NOCTI exam at the end of the year. And again, we score higher. I don't have exact numbers, so I couldn't get those from the state, but we score higher than the state average, but they couldn't get the yearly numbers from them. And also, our second year auto students take the ASE automotive exam. That's a smaller group, but those are the ones that are standardized. And then a lot of our programs have end of the year competencies and certificate type things that they do to make sure that the students are competent and ready to move on to the next level of whatever it is that they want to be doing. And along those lines, 80 to 90% of the students that come to LCTC either go on to college, trade school, or the military, and the rest could go right into their careers. But we find that the vast majority of our students do go on to post-secondary education. And we have what are known as articulation agreements with a number of colleges and universities, and some of them are listed on the board. I won't read through them, but an articulation agreement allows students to take a course here at the Career Center to get some free college credit if they attend that institution. For example, if one of our students were to take a health science course with us, and then they decided to go on to Schoolcraft College, they would receive credit for MA 180, which is a 4-credit class in medical clinical procedures. Our criminal justice students that go on to Schoolcraft get 3 credits for CJ 107, which is police field operations. So they can get a little head start on their college degrees and save a little bit of money along the way. So those articulation agreements, as you might imagine, are pretty popular with students and parents. All right, at this time, I would like to show you our new promotional video that we just had made. I was hoping that tonight would be the world premiere, but it's already leaked out. I think it's already on the website, and some couple of our retired teachers posted it on Facebook, and so it's definitely out there. The video was made by Mr. Nick Aldernick, who is behind the camera, so we can't see him, but Nick, kudos to you for all your help in making us look good in the video. And we plan to use the video at our open houses, on our website, obviously, and on our recruiting visits when we go to the different schools. So at this point in time, we're going to show you the video. Yes, if you could flip the lights. Hello, my name is Joe Anderson, and I'm the principal here at the Livonia Career Technical Center. We currently serve students from Churchill, Franklin, Stevenson, and Northville high schools, as well as Plymouth Canton and several surrounding charter and parochial schools. We combine cutting-edge technology with a hands-on philosophy to create students who are college and career ready. In this video, you will see all of our programs, as well as hear from our instructors and students.
The Hospitality Management Program is a 2-year program, and the students, they learn the basics of culinary arts. They'll rotate from dishes to bake shop to hotline to pantry to dining room to coffee bar, the storeroom area. They'll take care of all inventory. We teach them how to wait on customers. They make their own homemade rolls, homemade soup. Our curriculum is with the National Restaurant Association. Most of the students will go on usually to Schoolcraft, but then they also can go out into the industry to compete.
In the graphic design program here at the Career Center, typically students will work on projects within the Adobe software. Students will work in Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and InDesign, and they'll work on projects such as poster designs, brochures, advertisements, and other things related to print design. Students look into career fields as photography, illustration, graphic design, and advertising. Most of the students will go on into these career fields. Other students will go on to programs more business related.
In website design and interactive media, students learn Adobe Dreamweaver, which is a web development program, Adobe Fireworks, and Adobe Flash. Adobe Flash is an animation program which is used in movies like South Park or Disney animated movies. It's also used to create websites and games. I also teach a mobile apps and game development course for the web, and those students also use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Adobe Flash to create their games. And they follow a design and engineering process that game developers would use to create their games.
So this class, we do a lot of hands-on projects. We are involved in DECA, which is a marketing organization. So we'll have field trips and they'll be competing in events, DECA events. Also, we have speakers that come in from the industry. Currently this year we're having one of the College of Fashion Institutes coming in just next week. We're currently working on our fashion show where they're coming up with different theme ideas. We also are practicing a project runway because that will be a segment of the show as well.
Hi, I'm Ms. Dijak and this is sports medicine. We follow all the same standards as the other health professional classes in the building, but what makes us special is we branch off into certain careers. So it's going to be physical therapy, athletic training, OT, and exercise science. As you can see here, these are the schools in Michigan that our students can go to. What we do in class is we usually will learn all the anatomy and physiology first, and then we are going to branch off and do injury prevention, rehabilitation, and taping.
This is the medical occupations course at the Livonia Career Center. It encompasses a lot of the other medical terminology and anatomy that the other courses do. However, we go into a little bit of physical therapy, occupational therapy, EMT paramedic. There's a lot of nursing involved with moving and lifting patients and taking care of them. The class cross covers for just about anything you want to do in medical. Infection control, how to sterilize things. So I have students interested in everything from dental hygiene to pharmacy, nursing, physician, nurse anesthetist, veterinarian, so a little bit of everything.
Criminal Justice Technology is a class for anyone interested in possibly looking at careers in police, fire, communications, such as a dispatcher. It also will help those who are interested in Homeland Security, regular security, forwarding, moving into the military, or into corrections, working in the prisons, or even the jails. In addition, I have several students who have gone on to the military.
I teach two programs. I teach pre-nursing, pre-medicine for first-year students, and then I teach the advanced medicine program for kids who would like a little bit more. So they have to have taken a first-year program. Once they're successfully completed, they're allowed to come and take the second program. The first-year program, they learn pharmacology, they learn EKGs, some clinical laboratory skills. Then with the advanced medicine program, that's kind of a cool one because they get to kind of lead the way themselves. So if they're interested in learning something, we'll custom tailor the curriculum to them. They've done pediatrics right now. Their next unit is alternative and complementary medicine. We're going to be doing some dissection later this year, some advanced anatomy and physiology. And again, whatever the kids are interested in, that's what we'll do. They'll be training Ford Motor Company engineers in how to do CPR, which is pretty cool. We have an architect firm that's also asked the kids to come and teach them some CPR. I have a lot of kids who want to be physicians, a lot of nurses. We have some veterinarians. I have a young lady who's going to be a pathologist. We have kids who are interested in forensics. I have lots and lots of kids doing all sorts of things. I've been doing this for a while.
It's a 2-year construction program. The first year is a comprehensive construction course where students go through all facets of construction. Anything from flat work, masonry, block work, rough framing, finished carpentry, electrical, plumbing, heating, cooling, green building, heavy equipment operations. The second year program, we do a program with the city of Livonia, a partnership where we go into the city, we get a house and we rehab it every year. Roofing, siding, doors, windows, floors. We do a 60-hour builder's license prep course so when the students graduate they can move on and pursue their builder's license.
This is Auto Tech 1 and 2, and basically what's happening here is the kids are in their engine unit. So they're currently doing different tasks on different parts of the engine, and then they'll rotate from day to day as we go along. There's hundreds of careers that you get involved in, from working on cars to service managers to managers of places to write-up people, engineering field. So the doors are open wide based off of this class. These kids here can go out and they can change oil in the car, they can change tires on the car, and as they progress with the classes, they can do more complicated things or more involved things as they go along.
This is a architecture and engineering combined class. Kids made up of mechanical skills and artistic skills. We have this state-of-the-art software such as SolidWorks and Inventor and AutoCAD, Revit and Google SketchUp, 3D printer, so we have a state-of-the-art 3D printing. We also incorporate for engineering is the biomechanical engineering software. With Livonia and the Career Center, we are the only high school kids in America that are actually using that software. They have an opportunity to get into the design fields such as transportation design, civil engineering, architecture, interior design, and just a few of the career occupations they can enter into.
I teach two classes. One of the classes I teach is called Internet Engineering. It's for the student that's interested in how data networks works. The students learn about what goes on behind the scenes to create all that connectivity. It's geared for folks that want to be potentially network engineers or systems administrators. The second class that I teach is called Computer Repair, Computer Security. In that class, students learn about what a computer is, all the different parts, how to build one, how to repair one, how to install operating systems, how operating systems work. And then when they're finished with that piece, we move on to, okay, how do we secure these items? That'd be for people that are interested in doing computer tech support and moving on to potentially getting into the security field where you're actually, again, securing the digital assets out there.
The Career Intern program is a class for high caliber college-bound students who are interested in getting exploration of a career they're interested in before they go to college. I have students that are placed in law, in business, in medical, dental. It's an adjustment for students to get exposed to the real world. They have to learn a lot of the skills, which is what we really focus on in this class. It's a great opportunity. The kids really bond. They're from all three high schools, and it's just a great program that's been in existence in Livonia Public Schools for almost 40 years.
Right now, I'm doing a compression test. This is my 3-sided guitar pick.
I'm interning at Raymond James Financial. It's just a simple side-scrolling game. They collect items and dodge the enemies.
I don't know, the Career Center just seems a lot more comfortable than some of the home schools. I think it was a good choice to pick.
I do construction out of this class. I already work in construction. I've learned a lot more than I thought I even would being in this class.
I want to go to nursing and then eventually become a doctor.
I was thinking about becoming a perfusionist.
I want to own a chain of garages. Either computer science or computer engineering.
It really brings together all the schools. I met a lot of new kids this year that I never probably would have met through sports or anything else. This really brought us all together. It's kind of like one big family classroom.
It's a great experience because it helps me prepare for the future. It helps me decide what I want to do for the rest of my life.
So obviously, we're really happy with how that turned out, and we think that that is going to be a great recruiting and promotional tool for us as kids are able to take a look at that, and parents are able to take a look at that and see a little bit of all the programs that we have to offer, and then we hope to entice them to come to the building for a visit and be able to see the classrooms and talk to the teachers. Our big open house is coming up on February 9th at 7 o'clock. Shameless plug for that, and we hope that as many people come by to visit us as possible. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who's going to talk a little bit about our academic integration.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening. While the development of hands-on technical skills may be the first thing that comes to mind when you think of LCTC, applied academic skills are also of critical importance as we prepare our students for college and career. All Career Center students practice a variety of literacy and math-based skills in the contexts of their individual CTE courses. Plus, we also offer several core academic classes right here in our building. First, we'll speak about English language arts. In English language arts, we've taken on the challenge of addressing the Common Core standards for literacy and technical subjects. My role as literacy consultant here at LCTC has allowed me to observe and coach our CTE teachers in the implementation of standards-based best practices in literacy. Some examples include reading and analyzing complex nonfiction texts like newspapers, trade publications, and technical manuals, completing formal research projects on topics relevant to CTE areas, writing in professional genres such as resumes, business plans, and formal letters, and other activities. Through my additional consulting responsibilities with Wayne Risa, I've had the unique opportunity to model these literacy practices for teachers in other districts throughout the region as well. In addition to disciplinary literacy that's embedded into each of our CTE programs, we also offer seniors the opportunity to earn their core English language arts credit at LCTC. Now, this option is especially useful for out-of-district students whose home school schedules require them to spend an extra hour in our building. But it's also beneficial for LPS students with scheduling conflicts that may prevent them from taking a CTE course here. Currently, leadership in literature and media literacy are the courses that are available to 12th graders. Like English language arts, math is also embedded in every program at LCTC. In fact, each of our CTE classes includes enough math content to fulfill our students' senior math requirement. Whether they're creating blueprints of model homes and architecture, estimating the cost of supplies and construction trades, or calculating the proper dosage of a medication in our health science courses, our students regularly apply essential math skills in the context of their CTE classes. Now, while we offer English language arts courses to our seniors, 11th graders can take advantage of our Algebra 2 offerings, and those are available primarily to out-of-district students again, but also to LPS students with scheduling difficulties that could prevent them from attending classes here. Like our language arts courses, LCTC's Algebra 2 options provide the same rigorous curriculum as the home high schools, but here in the Career Center setting. And our final academic offering consists of online courses through Apex Learning. Out-of-district students who need an extra hour at LCTC but cannot be placed in one of our language arts or math options can take an online elective. This actually allows them to receive valuable experience with an online learning format while also receiving elective credit. Career Center students can also take an Apex Learning course independently for credit recovery, allowing them the flexibility to work on course content at home without taking up a period of their schedule, while also receiving support from highly qualified instructors at LCTC to monitor their progress and assist them when necessary.
All right, thank you very much. That concludes our part of the program, but we'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have for us.
Any questions or comments? President Burke.
Obviously, Livonia Public Schools, the three main high schools, know a whole lot about the Career Technical Center. And I'm glad that we consistently reach out to other public schools in the area and parochial, charter schools and homeschools. Can you tell me, now the district has been doing quite a bit of reaching out to the parochial schools, homeschool environments and so forth. Is the Career Tech Center doing their own branch of that, or is it pretty much coming under the umbrella of the district?
It's coming under the umbrella of the district for the most part. We've had cooperative agreements for quite a while with Plymouth Canton, Redford Union, Northville, and the program. So we have contacts already in those districts. We have liaisons. We make sure that they get the information for the open houses and the different programs that we have. When we do our mailings, homeschool, parochial school students and parents would receive those mailings as well, inviting them to come to the building to take a look at things.
Okay.
So, like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Any others? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I am impressed at the growth especially over the last year. That's tremendous. Is there still room for growth?
A little bit. We're close to capacity, which is great, but we do have some room yet. I think we could, if everything fell right with the scheduling, which of course it never does, but if everything fell right with the numbers, we could probably handle 950. I think we could get another 75. The teachers are out there going, no, we're full. Especially a couple that I've maybe overfilled this year. But I didn't want to turn anybody away, so we just added a little bit, and went over. But yeah, we could do a little more. And then obviously, all of the Livonia Public School students get their classes first, and then we fill the available seats with out-of-district students. But we really haven't had to churn very many away. There's a couple of programs that are really popular that fill up that we've had to say no to out-of-district kids, but even no to LPS kids a couple of times just because they fill up. But for the most part, we were able to get everybody in that wanted to.
Anyone else? Gentlemen, thank you so much for a very informative presentation and that awesome video. Thanks for sharing that with us. It certainly shows the fantastic programs that LPS offers to give students opportunity to experience a large number of career opportunities. So thank you for what you're doing for our students.
Great. It was our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to our second item on the curriculum committee, our quarterly focus school report. And Mrs. Ellis will give us that presentation. She's hurrying along.
Thank you, Mrs. Laura. Good evening again, everyone. Tonight's Focus School Quarterly Report is one of 4 presentations required to show our efforts in reducing student achievement gaps. Before I get into the quarterly report, I thought I would provide some background information on our focus school status designations. So I'm going to take you back to this past spring. The Michigan Department of Education submitted an amendment to its flexibility waiver of the Elementary and Secondary School Act. And this amendment included details that suspended some schools from their focus school designation, as well as all of the requirements that go along with focus school designation. And that would occur if a school met some specific, what they call exit criteria. There are 2 types of exit criteria. One had to do with improvement and one has to do with achievement. The improvement criteria is if the improvement of a focus school's bottom 30% is greater than the statewide average of the bottom 30% subgroup's improvement. So in other words, a focus school's 30% has to be improving at a rate greater than the statewide average of the improvement of the bottom 30%. The other has to do with achievement, and it follows the same pattern. If a focus school's achievement of the bottom 30% is greater than the statewide average of the bottom 30% subgroup's achievement, okay? And a school has to meet that criteria, either one of those 2 criteria for 2 consecutive years, or a combination of one criteria 1 year and the other criteria the second year. Then the state has 3 focus school cohorts, the 2012 focus school cohort, 2013, and 2014. The 2012 focus school cohort, that exit criteria is applied to the 2012-13 MEP MME results and the 2013-14 MEP MME results. In the 2012 focus school cohort, Livonia had 3 schools, Frost, Cass, and Garfield. When this exit criteria was applied to those 3 schools, 2 schools were removed from focus school status, Cass and Frost. Garfield still remained as a focus school. In the 2013 focus school cohort, the state's looking at the 13-14 results and 2015 results. Livonia has 2 schools in that cohort group, Churchill and Franklin. The state has not released any information about those focus school designations because the 2015 M-STEP results just were released in December. Therefore, Churchill and Franklin must continue their focus school designation, which then is why we have 3 schools now in our focus school cohort group in our district. We don't, in the 2014 focus school, Livonia does not have any schools in that cohort group, just in the 2012 and 2013. So we have 3 focus schools, which is why our focus school quarterly report tonight will be about those 3 schools, okay? The focus school report's about 10 pages long, and instead of reading that entire report to you, I'm just going to highlight the areas that we are required to present to our Board of Education at a public meeting. I will make sure that Mrs. Oquist gets copies of that report so that she can include it in her weekly update to you. So the focus school report requires us to present 2 types of data to the board: the data-driven dialogues that occurred at the district and school level, and then the teaching and learning priorities that our schools have put in place as a result of the data-driven dialogues. So I'm going to begin with the data-driven dialogues that have occurred in our school district and in our schools from the beginning of September through the end of November. That's the time period that this focus school quarterly report covers. So beginning at the district level, the district's DOI, Division of Instruction, and the Academic Services Department reviewed the results of the fall administration of the iReady Mathematics Assessment. That's our new diagnostic assessment that we're administering to kindergarten through 6th grade students. This was baseline data and provided us with an understanding of the level of math skills that our students possess at the start of a new grade. I met with the Garfield School Improvement Team and reviewed their school improvement plan for the 2015-16 school year to ensure that student subgroups with low proficiency scores were identified in their plans, as well as interventions were identified to help boost the achievement of those subgroups. And we made changes to their plans as a result of this analysis. The district provided an additional 2/10 teacher staff at both Churchill and Franklin High School. Churchill is using the additional staffing to offer 2 academic prep classes to support their bottom 30% of their students, and Franklin is using their additional staffing to add an additional ELA and an additional biology class to support those struggling 9th grade students. Moving on to the school level, beginning with Garfield, the staff administered the universal screeners to their students at the start of the school year, which is part of the implementation plan of our Operation Student Success team. And these universal screeners are assessments that identify levels of proficiency in students in the academic areas. Grade level teams of teachers analyzed the results of the administration of the iReady diagnostic math, and because Garfield is a Title I school, they were able to use their Title I funds to administer the iReady diagnostic reading assessment, and they were analyzing those results. They determined where additional instruction was needed to reduce the learning gaps, and they selected students for Tier 2 interventions. The staff at Garfield also engaged in grade-level data digs, where grade-level teams of teachers analyzed the results of their universal screeners and of the iReady assessments. They identified students scoring below the proficiency benchmarks, and they planned specific interventions for each student based on his or her needs. Additionally, each Thursday, the Garfield Title I staff and principal meet to review intervention groups, discuss progress monitoring of students, and then plan next steps for being able to service and meet the needs of their at-risk learners. Now I'll move on to the high school, beginning with Churchill High School. The resource room teachers examined data pertaining to students with IEPs. They reviewed student failures, attendance data, and discussed struggles for individual students. Then the resource room teachers created a department plan that was able to support each student within their content area department. In October, Churchill administered a practice SAT test to juniors. The administrative team and the department chairs analyzed the results to generate a plan on how best to prepare students for the SAT test in April, and that included both creating before school after-school, and in-school support classes. Additionally, the Churchill Focus School team identified students to participate in the State Superintendent's Dropout Challenge. Students were also selected who would be provided a staff mentor or to participate in an absence group in order to help reduce the number of days that they're absent from school. And at Churchill High School, the school improvement team analyzed their data from their vocabulary initiative, and they made plans to further integrate key words into their lessons. Moving on to Franklin High School, the administrative staff, the content area and special education department chairs, the school improvement co-chairs, and the counselors revised their current school improvement plans in order to support students who struggle in reading and in writing within their content areas. And then they also identified how they were going to support students who were lacking in math skills. That concludes the data dialogue section of the quarterly report. So now I'm going to move on to the teaching and learning priorities. At Garfield School, teachers are providing after-school reading opportunities using Madonna University College of Education students. Additionally, a variety of Tier 2 academic interventions are provided throughout the day. These include leveled literacy interventions, Fast Forward, which is an online program designed to improve language development and reading skills, Touch Math and Fast Math for developing basic math fact fluency, and Raz Kids, which is an online interactive e-reader. At Churchill High School, the staff is continuing their vocabulary initiative, focusing on content-specific words identified by each content area. And as a result of the analysis of the SAT practice test, after school and before school SAT prep sessions are available to juniors, and SAT-type questions have been developed and are being reviewed with juniors in their math and science classes, along with effective test-taking skills. At Churchill, the staff have embraced the new mobile device that's being piloted at their school and are frequently using them in their classes to engage students and to extend their learning. At Franklin High School, the Right to Learn program is being used in ELA classes to assist students in the development of their writing skills. This program provides students with immediate feedback on their writing, which, when coupled with teacher instruction, helps students develop the 6 essential writing skills that they need to be successful. In both ELA and social studies classes, teachers are using the magazine called The Week with students, and they're using that to practice close reading strategies and to practice writing summaries as well as argument essays. In Franklin High School this year initiated a vocabulary program, and they administered a first semester assessment to determine baseline data. Their efforts are being targeted specifically at the bottom 30% of the students on that assessment. So as you can see with what I just shared with you, our schools are all engaged in multiple data-driven dialogues. And as a result of those dialogues, they are continuing the programs that they had in place to support their lower performing students or their bottom 30%, as well as extending existing programs and creating some new programs. So that concludes tonight's first quarterly report. There will be 3 additional reports as we go through the school year. And I'd be happy to respond to any questions or comments that the board may have.
It sounds like a lot of the improvements are classroom embedded. A few of them struck me as something that maybe a voluntary or an after-school type thing, like the SAT prep sessions. Do you know off the top of your head if some of those are voluntary or after-school type offerings, or if they're all embedded in the school day?
The before school and after school SAT prep are targeted at students, so students are invited to attend those sessions. And then some of them are targeted in classroom through their 11th grade ELA classes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Mr. Summers?
how are, in the high school interventions, the Right to Learn program sounds like that's something that's easily can be progress monitored. With things like the SAT preparation, some of the embedded ELA programs, how are the schools able to progress monitor to see if these are being effective in the short term?
That's an excellent question. I don't have an answer for you, but I would be very happy to get an answer for you.
Thanks.
Well, Mrs. Ellis, thank you so much once again for keeping us informed on our quarterly focused school reports. Thank you for the work that you put into it and presenting that and giving us a very informative presentation.
Thank you very much. My
Oh,
pleasure.
President Burton has another question.
I did have one other question I forgot to ask you. You said for our 2 high schools that are still listed as priority schools, and that they can't...
Focus schools.
I'm sorry, focus schools, sorry. That they are not released yet because the state information is not released yet. When that is released, will they then remove schools from that listing, or is that going to be a listing that they're going to be on for the rest of the school year? Or do you not know yet because the state hasn't told us?
I don't know because the state has not released any information about the focus school designations yet for the 2013 cohort group.
Okay.
So they haven't released anything. I'm not sure. At this point, my sense is that once we've started the focus school requirements for the school year, my sense is that they will expect them to continue. But, you know, it's just a guess at this point. Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And President Burton, that concludes our curriculum committee for tonight.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 3, building and site. I'll turn it over to our chair, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Burton. We have 7 items on our building and site, and Mrs. Ellis, don't go away because you are our first, our bid results for elementary community room technology 2013 bond. If you can bring us up to date.
I'm going to do an introduction, and then I have some gentlemen who are joining me that are going to help with that process. So tonight we are bringing to the board the bid results for the elementary school community room technology, which includes a commercial grade digital projector, an electronic display screen, and control equipment that is housed in a lockable cabinet. And this will be for the community rooms at our K-4 schools, and we have 12 of them, and Webster, which brings the total to 13. And our community rooms are used for professional development for staff, they're used for assemblies for students, they're used for parent presentations, and they're used for community events. So our community rooms really service a variety of needs and provide a variety of uses for our schools. And to share with you the bid process that led to the recommendation to award the elementary school community room technology to Digital Age Technology, Inc. I have 2 gentlemen who are joining me tonight, and that is Mr. Matt Linder and Mr. Rob Greger from Barton Mallow, who are going to walk through the process and share with you more details. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Sheila. So again, thank you for allowing me to present tonight. I will take you through the recommendation to award the K-4 community rooms. This is really the result of an RFP process that took place back in the late fall and early winter. RFP was released in the middle of November, and we took bids in on the 9th of December. The RFP went out again for the community room technologies for the K-4 buildings and Webster. And really the solution that we're talking about here is very similar to what you would see in this room here in terms of, again, that large commercial grade projector, the screen, the lockable cabinet with the control equipment, and then there's an audio component to it as well, amplifier and speakers that will allow each of the buildings to go ahead and use those spaces for a multitude of purposes. So again, we took bids in on the 9th of December. We got 5 total bids. and went through the process of analyzing those bids, interviewing the finalist vendor, the sorts of activities you would expect to see out of this process, and concluded to recommend to award this project to Digital Age Technologies. They were the low bidder. And they did go through several rounds of clarification as well as interview to confirm that their bid was inclusive of all the required scope of the RFP. So we do have a good compliant low bid. So we've talked about the bid process, we've talked about the solution at a very high level. From an implementation standpoint, we would look to kick off implementation of these rooms essentially immediately upon contract execution, assuming that we get an award from this recommendation. And really what we're talking about is through the winter and spring of 2016, we would look to implement Cleveland, Coolidge, Rosedale, Hayes, Kennedy, and Roosevelt. And then in the summer of 2016, implementation for Grant, Hoover, and Randolph. And then finally, in 2017, following the construction schedule, the balance of the buildings on the project, Buchanan, Cass, Garfield, and Webster. Again, very briefly and high level, that's the process, that's the solution, and what we're looking to recommend. The only other thing that I would potentially add to that is that the total recommended amount on this is $185,566. We are asking for a 10% contingency to be held, to be used during implementation only if needed, if we need to make changes during the implementation. And from a budgetary standpoint, this is well under the bond budget for this category. Bond budget for the category was $501,000. We did implement the community rooms in the upper elementaries and the secondary buildings as a part of the Classroom AV project. So assuming we get through the implementation without any major issues, we will be well under budget for this project as well. So that being said, Rob, unless you have anything you'd like to add, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Gentlemen, the variances between the bids themselves, from the low bidder to the second low bidder was, what, $35,000, $40,000, if not more. The equipment that they're supplying, it's equal to what the other bidders? It's the same manufacturer?
Yeah, Rob, you can speak to manufacturer.
It's not the same manufacturer.
It is not.
It's equal to the equipment that we have requested. We went over that in some depth with them.
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
We went over that in some depth with them when we did the post-bid with them, and we're quite comfortable that it'll fulfill the purpose.
It will satisfy the needs of what we need, and it will hold up, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, wonderful.
There
Thank
is
you.
a 3-year warranty built into the equipment and the installation services.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Superintendent Oakwith.
Thank you. I just want to make a quick comment on the utilization of this. So I shared a little bit in my update with you, and Mrs. Alice did the same. But, many of you have had students come through our elementary schools, and oftentimes you've been there for parent presentations. You may have seen us prepare for staff professional development. Many times we house those in our schools. We also have students that come together either by grade levels or the entire school together. And having been a principal for 16 years, there were many mornings, evenings, and weekends where we scrambled to put together a projector on a cart, a laptop to go with it, hook that all up, put up a temporary screen, and hope that all came together in our schools and for our presentations. And this is just one of those enhancements that the work that you put together as a board when this bond was initially envisioned. Some of the things that we talked about was the ability for us to engage our community and present to our staff, our students, and our parents. And this is something, it's been on display and been in use at Cooper Elementary. It really is a very impressive system that is going to be very user-friendly for our staff, but I believe also present our schools and the information our schools are sharing in a very professional and positive light. So although this may not be one of the largest dollar amount purchases, and especially compared to some of our construction, this is just one of those elements that really brings us to the next level. And we're really proud to have this coming into our schools. I know our principals and our staff are very excited about it as well.
Thank you, Ms. Oquist. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I think this is a wonderful effort. I'm curious about location. Some of these schools have a little theater or a sort of a room already established, and some don't. Is this going to, where are you going to put these?
These are going to go in the multipurpose rooms.
Okay, I don't know that Webster has one.
Otherwise known as the gym.
The gym.
Oh, the gym.
AKA the gym.
In our K-4 schools, as you probably know, that's the gym, the cafeteria, the assembly area, parent presentation, and often host PD.
Yeah.
So it really is a multi-purpose room. And we really looked, Mrs. Jarvis, at classrooms, as you mentioned, little theaters, leveled library areas, and we really thought if we were going to invest this type of money in these funds into this equipment, that we wanted to have an area where we could get the largest number of either students and or parents and families for presentations and concerts, etc. And really our multipurpose rooms by far are the largest areas in our school. So.
Well, that's going to make them much more useful.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? I have just one then. This is all to be housed in a lockable cabinet. Is the cabinet itself mobile?
No.
Okay. It's a stationary.
I wouldn't say that it has to be stationary. We could look into a mobile cabinet, but that was not the intent initially.
Okay.
As designed, it would be similar to what we have here back in the corner of this room.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
I'll just add something that I thought maybe the board might ask, and that is that the speakers will be caged so that since this is in the gym, with the activities that go on in the gym, they will be caged so that they will be protected, as will the projector. And I had an opportunity to hear this and see this system at Cooper, and it is really amazing. And I'm so excited and looking forward to having these in all of our K-4 schools.
Great. This will be a regular agenda?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to 3B, and I hope Mrs. Abby took a nap this afternoon because she's on board for the remainder.
No napping on the weekdays, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you very much.
Item B is our budget update on Phase 2 projects.
As you can see, Scott Smith from Plant Moran is handing out a binder, so that will tell you what we're in for right now. As we're getting a binder full of information, we are bringing several 2013 bond update items, both looking back at last summer to see what happened with our last phase of schools and the update on the budget to actual on those, as well as then we have a recommendation this evening for our 3 elementary schools for summer of 2016, and the ever exciting topic of asbestos and environmental consultants. So no one will be falling asleep or taking naps. I'm convinced of it. So Scott is handing those out. Paul Terrio is joining us, and Scott will join us at the table. Your binder may not be in the exact same order of the agenda, so we'll go in the order of the agenda. Scott will, or Paul will pull us through the order of the agenda, but we may be flipping around your 3-ring binder a little bit. Paul's handing out the first topic, which is to talk about last summer's projects and how those projects came in as we talk about budget to actual variances. Good news is we have a positive variance, meaning that we are putting money back into the owner's contingency fund. So overall, meaning we did not spend every nickel of our contingency that the board had approved this time last year in order to get these projects off the ground. And I don't know, Scott, if you want to get started, or is this a Paul T. or... Is this a Paul T?
I can get started on these.
I got to get started on these too. You've seen this format before. We brought this to you to look at all the overall projects that we had, not just the construction, but the abatement, IT, and also some of the smaller projects, the move management, and what was the last one? Management and security as well. So with that, I'll let Paul get into the detail of that and give you all the good news.
Lisa, so we thought it'd be prudent, since we're here with another binder of 2016 awards, to talk about 2015 projects and how they finished up. As you can see, this is the same report we gave last year at about the same time here. We've got the construction projects, Hayes, Kennedy, Roosevelt, Riley Emerson, and then Franklin that we're reporting on. Franklin, because that project is still ongoing, we've kind of zeroed out the variance on there and making the assumption that we'll spend most of that contingency money and report back on that project next year. But for the other 5, we're looking at a positive variance of about $700,000, which is good news. Last year, we carried 10% contingency on those construction projects. Because this variance is so high, this year we're actually looking at carrying a little bit less contingency money to kind of help the budget a little bit, and Scott will get into that when we get into next year's projects. But so that's great news on the contingency front, on the construction side. On the abatement projects, we have similar good news. We saved about $142 of the $177,000 in contingency. And then if you flip the page, you'll see 3 other sections. There's the technology projects. The technology projects are still ongoing, so I kind of highlighted them in yellow. Most of those projects are multi-year projects that are not really ending. So that variance is kind of still in flux, let's say. The security projects came in just under the wire, and then the moving projects, we've got about a $42,000 variance. So all told, right now at the moment, not counting Franklin, we're about $1.3 million to the good. The way I'm looking at it is there's about $900,000 that we're going to transfer now from those specific projects back to the owner's contingency fund. That'll
The
help.
IT will stay as it is.
The IT will stay, and the other $900,000 will come back to the big kitty, I guess, so to speak. So good news, similar to how we did last year. I think maybe even a little bit better. So.
Okay, questions?
This is just an update for the board, doesn't need to take any action on those.
All right, so that completes item D.
Oh, Mr. Summers has a question.
Oh,
Just a quick refresher. We're putting 900 into the owner's contingency with Franklin and these upcoming projects. We're going to be eating some of that, correct, Cal?
Yeah, we'll be getting to that shortly.
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Paul, the pending change orders for that $269,000 at Franklin, refresh us, because I know I don't remember. The change order process for the board is what dollar amount or what percentage?
Basically, if we exceed the amount, the $1.4 million that the board had set aside, or if any one single item is over $100,000, we'd be bringing it back to the board for their approval. I think the largest one we've had on Franklin to date was about just under $70,000 or so for a new energy recovery unit to serve the science wing. That one I had, Scott and I have spent the last couple months reviewing that, trying to get the cost down a little bit, and we presented that last week to Ms. Abby and Ms. Oquist and had them approve it for us. So that one was well below the limit.
I think Paul went through that very quickly, but that $269,000 aren't actual change orders that have been approved at this point. What he's saying is he just wants to hold it as a place card because we're really smack dab in the middle of the
Right.
Franklin project. So rather than saying, oh, we think we might be good, $269,000, we don't know that yet.
Right.
So we have a big, we have a big summer coming up.
A lot of that 269 is the right-of-way work that we've been back and forth with the county on as to exactly what they want and exactly what we have to do. So that's what the majority of those pending ones are. So
Right.
we're almost there.
I know. At least we have a new friend at the county again, so we'll be good. Thank you.
Any other questions on B? All right, that'll move us to C, change order for Nova Environmental.
So as Ms. Abby mentioned, we're a little bit out of order on our binder here, so we're going to jump around. For the environmental for Nova, that would be section B. So that's the environmental consulting.
Too far.
And I'm just going to go through all of section B, which I know might cover more than one of the agenda items. But so The first summer, we had put out an RFP, actually it was probably the fall of 2014, in order to hire an environmental consultant for the project. We actually had, I think, 5 or 6 firms that responded. We ended up awarding it to 2 different firms to split it up to make sure we had enough coverage with the volume of work that we were doing the first summer. We hired Nova Environmental and then ETC Group. So Nova Environmental basically was tasked with the lower elementary school projects. We've been very happy with the work they've done. They've done an excellent job for us. We're looking to extend them out and have them do the next batch of elementary schools. So Grant, Hoover, and Randolph this summer. So this first half of this award recommendation is to extend Nova's contract via change order. And the amount of that would be $125,000, which is over 100, which is why we're here, to make sure that we're following those accounting procedures.
So that's B2, if you're looking at your binder.
Yep, or the second paragraph of the letter there. And then for Johnson & Holmes, ETC had been doing the work on the upper elementaries, middle schools, and high schools. We're actually,
Can I stop you for a second? Can we, because it's a separate agenda item.
Oh, sorry.
Are there, that's okay. Are there any questions on the Nova change order? And then we'll actually move to the next agenda item and ask you to put this on the agenda once we get through the questions and any questions on the Nova change order. So that item is just strictly a change order to extend Nova's contract, terms the same as they are, and this is what the estimated cost is for those 3 elementary projects.
All right, so we need to put that on the regular agenda.
Correct. And I think we have some questions.
Okay.
Sorry, it's just our processes.
Thank you. No,
That's
no.
okay.
We'll renumber everything for next week.
That's okay. The change order for Nova, is the cost that we're being charged the same or largely similar to what we have been charged to the first batch of elementary schools we had done?
Yeah, it's similar. It's really hourly, not to exceed number. So their costs are really driven by how long it takes to do the abatement work out in the field. I would say that they're pretty competitive. And the reason it's coming as a change order is because we've kind of set up the contract that way. We really wanted to engage them only for the first year, make sure they performed.
I remember that when
make sure
we
were
talked about
happy.
this at the very beginning.
Yep.
So.
Yep, so they're basically on a year-to-year contract with, we have the right to renew it or not to renew it, whether we're happy or not. And we've set up the commissioning that way, the security that way, so it really gives us a lot more flexibility and a lot more control and leverage, so.
It means we come to you more, but.
Right.
It does.
A lot more incentive for them to continue to do a good job.
Right.
and keep
Exactly.
pencil
So when you
sharp.
hear the word change order, it's not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing.
Right. But these prices are, it's okay, so it's an hourly rate, so it would be
Yep.
the same or similar hourly, but the number of hours depends on what they're going to find in that given building.
Exactly, and this is their estimate of how long it'll take to do it. And you can see the projects that have more abatement work, their cost is projected to be higher, and where it's lower, it's lower. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? No, then put that on
Regular
regular agenda.
Okay, so that was 3C.
That was 3C, correct.
Just make sure we're all on the same
Yep.
one that will go on the regular agenda.
Same binder.
Yep.
Not
Okay.
B2, but 3C.
So then we'll go to 3D, recommendation for environmental consultant, phase 3, middle and high school projects.
Mr. Terry.
Yep, and I'll take the
Next
blame on the
agenda.
numbering. I should have checked
That's okay.
with the agenda to make sure we numbered everything the same way. But the next one is the environmental consulting for Johnson & Holmes. As I mentioned, we had kind of had both firms on a year-to-year contract. For the upper elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, well, actually just the upper elementaries and the middle schools at the moment. We're going to deal with Stevenson in the future here coming up. But those projects we're looking to make a change and go with ARC Environmental. ARC responded to the original RFP back in 2014. They were actually, we had interviewed 3 firms. They were the 3rd firm that we did not award to. But looking at the performance on those projects, we weren't quite as satisfied with how things were going, so we're looking to make a change to ARC. I've worked with them quite a bit, as has Harry Lau and some of the other staff, and they've done a great job helping us get to this point of getting things bid out, but we wanted to bring it back to the board for the larger piece of doing the summer monitoring work and testing work and compliance work. So their contract would be $55,000 for the 2 buildings. And again, that's hourly rates, not to exceed amount, so.
Questions? Seeing none. President Burton.
again, pricing-wise, is ARC going to be similar to ETC? Are we looking at a large price difference? What are we looking at?
Yeah, their
price-wise?
unit prices are pretty much in line. They're all pretty similar. It really, again, just comes down to how fast the contractors work. And we've spent a lot of time with the construction managers making sure that the schedule for the abatement coincides with the construction schedule. And it really becomes a dance through the building. We're zoning things off and making sure we leave enough time for the construction to get completed before the end of August. So,
Okay.
but yeah, cost-wise, it's very competitive.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And one of the reasons we're using two firms, and as you'll see as we move forward with actual contractors, we use multiple firms because you just can't get all that, you just got to get it done so that you
Right.
can get into the construction. So pleased to find another firm that we felt was going to help us get through that quicker this year,
Mrs.
or more
Bell.
efficiently this year.
Do we have any issues left over from the prior contractor, or it just didn't work out?
They're still actually working at Franklin, so Franklin is half abated. They're going to do the rest of the abatement,
Okay.
or oversee the abatement next summer.
Okay.
On Franklin, it was really a myriad of things, just wasn't working out as well as we had hoped, so.
But we don't have any unfinished business
Nope.
or crazy
No,
stuff?
really just
that we're-
Franklin, which is just the second phase.
Yeah, but in the schools
they're-
that they finished, they're done.
They're done,
Yeah.
and
Yep,
we got through
Mhm.
satisfactorily and
we did,
just need to
Yep.
move on.
exactly.
Okay.
Further questions?
So this will be for Stevenson, Holmes, and Johnson, correct?
Actually,
No.
Stevenson.
Johnson and Holmes.
Stevenson, we were hoping to bring, but we decided to defer that one probably till February.
Okay, I just have one.
Mrs. McDonald?
There should be a note that Stevenson will be presented at a later date in the award recommendation letter.
Since I'm confused, I'm going to ask the question. So ARC Environmental is a new contractor? Or we've had them prior?
Professional service.
Well, no, I understand that.
For the bond project?
Yes.
Yes, they are a new firm. They did respond to the original RFP,
Uh-huh.
and they were one of the firms that we interviewed, and they were, I would say, that close to getting hired, but we went in a different direction, and I guess now we're revisiting that decision and giving them a chance to prove that they deserve to work on the projects, if you will.
Okay, and the name of the prior contractor was?
ETC Group?
Okay, great, thank you.
And I think we all appreciate the fact that you are continuing to evaluate and reevaluate the contractors that we do have to keep us on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, we like to have leverage, as we said, on these year-to-year contracts, so that if we're not satisfied, then we make our displeasure known and give everyone a chance to maybe address those concerns, and if they're not addressed, then we look to make a change, so that's kind of what happened in this instance.
If there are no other questions, then this will be regular as well. And that'll take us to item 3E, bid results for abatement contractor Phase 3 elementary school projects.
Where are we on that one?
C.
C? Okay, that is items tab C.
Yep, C1.
So this is for the actual contractor to do the abatement work that Nova will be supervising and monitoring.
Correct. So you'll see C1, there's a recommendation letter there. Bids went out in December and were received on December 16th. We had actually 10 separate bids on the elementary school project, so we had great coverage on those. And we're looking at, or Nova is recommending that we hire environmental maintenance engineers at Grant and Randolph, and qualified abatement services on Hoover. Hoover is by far the bigger job. It has some of the spray-on insulation up above the ceiling again. So they're actually not just abating, but they're actually doing all the ceiling demolition work as well. So that's why that budget number is considerably higher. Similar to what we did at Coolidge and then Kennedy last year. So that schedule is a little bit tighter. So we're actually looking at kind of accelerating the abatement work, let's say, working a second shift, trying to get done a little bit faster so that the construction has more time to finish up. So.
Questions? Mr. Centers.
Paul, these buildings are all done with the abatement work that we're doing right now. Are they going to be completely asbestos-free, or are there areas that we still haven't maybe touched?
Yeah, there's still some areas, I would say mostly pipe fitting and pipe wrap in areas that we're not disturbing. There may be some flooring, not very much, maybe in a storage room or something of that nature. But for the most part, anything that is easily available while we're out there, we're trying to take care of. But they will not be 100% free.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, this will go on regular as well.
Right.
And that takes us to item 3F, bid results for abatement, contractor Phase 3 upper elementary and middle schools.
So we're still in the same place. We're still in C, correct?
Yep.
And if you look at C2, you can see the recommendation in total for all of the lower elementary, the upper elementary, and the middle school project for next summer.
Yep.
Paul can talk about the contractor they're recommending, but I also just wanted to mention that in total, we are looking, in total, we're under budget, as Paul mentioned. Hoover's going to be a bit of a challenge. That budget was a little understated, but overall, between the schools, we're under budget in our recommendation on abatement contractors for this summer's projects.
Yep, to the tune of about $283,000, which is good news as well. Every little bit helps, or every big bit helps. So you'll find in section C2, or C3, I should say, ARC Environmental's award recommendation letter. At Johnson, they're recommending environmental maintenance engineers again. They were the low bid. At Holmes, we're recommending different
New
firm.
company, yeah.
Oh, actually, it might be the same firm. Oh, I think I looked at the second letter first. Yep, I did.
It's environmental maintenance engineers.
Yep.
For Johnson.
Where are we looking at, Paul?
In C3.
In here.
C3.
In the letters.
Yep, so Johnson, we're recommending environmental maintenance engineers, and then at Holmes, I believe it's the same firm. So that firm was actually low on, I believe, 4 or 5 of the buildings. We were a little bit concerned that they had the manpower to do that many of our projects at once. I mean, the reason we're splitting the bids up with different environmental consultants and different buildings is to make sure that any one firm doesn't bite off more than they can chew. So we did put them through the ringer quite a bit. And there was one project where they were low, and we actually went with the second low bidder, just because we were concerned that they wouldn't have the manpower to keep up. But these two would both be going to environmental maintenance. So.
Questions? Mrs. McDowell?
Thank you. Paul, just, when did these bid? They bid
December.
December, okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
So we're looking at ARC for Johnson, right?
Yeah, ARC would be overseeing Johnson and Holmes as our consultant.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Mr. Centers?
Looking at Grant Elementary, is there little abatement to do there, or are we, it just doesn't need to be disturbed, or what's this scenario?
Yeah, Grant's a little bit different in that a lot of the flooring has already been abated. The gymnasium and corridors are all new ceiling, or all new floor tile. A lot of the classrooms have newer floor tile, and what's left that's being replaced, a lot of the mastic is not hot. So there's really not that much abatement work to be done there. We still had to survey the building and do all the upfront legwork to make sure that we knew what was and what was not ACM. So there was some upfront work, but really on the back end, there's not much.
Great.
Any other questions? Seeing none, this will be on regular as well. And that brings us to our last item, 3G, bid results for construction Phase 3 elementary school projects.
And again, if you have any questions between now and next Tuesday, January 19th, please don't hesitate to get those to us. And we'd be happy to answer
Yep.
any questions on this information.
So now we're back to Section A. And this is the award recommendation for the 3 lower elementary schools for this summer, Grant, Hoover, and Roosevelt. And as you know, we've had a fair amount of discussion, and let Paul get into the details, but we've had a fair amount of discussion in the fall when we talked about putting out these bids, and we had both at our very initial designs and our very, very first cost estimates that we were starting to feel the pressure of the Detroit construction market, Southeast Michigan construction market, and starting to see some of that pricing. I see Steve Banchero is here this evening from McCarthy Smith, and that's not just Livonia projects, that's all projects in Southeast Michigan right now. So we talked back early in the fall, and then again when we brought the estimates, that we anticipated that the budgets for these projects might be low, or the projects might come in higher than the budgets. And indeed, that's what you'll see this evening when we go through this in detail. So I will let Paul talk a little bit about the bid process and what we're recommending, and what we've done, what we put out with alternates, and what we are recommending this evening, I think Scott and Paul. And then also we'll talk a little bit about how we'll address that issue with these being over budget. So I'll let you guys get into some of the detail, and then we'll come back and talk about the budgets in total.
Thanks, Ms. Abby. I guess if we look at tab 1, or I, of section A, our recommendation letter is for about $9.5 million, and that would cover all 3 schools. That covers your contingency of the CM fees from McCarthy and Smith, as well as the construction costs. Despite the upward trend in costs, we still did get good turnout. We had over almost 140 bids, which is maybe not quite as many as last year, but very similar participation as last year. So the interest is still there, just costs seem to be creeping a little bit. Section 2 really is where we recap it. And of our roughly $7 million budget, right now we're here asking for about $8.2 million in recommended costs for the hard construction. One thing to just clarify, similar to last year, there were a couple categories that we didn't recommend here at the initial board meeting, and that's because we either didn't get good coverage or we weren't comfortable at this point to put those folks in front of you. We anticipate those to be in the $350,000 to $400,000 range of costs that are not in this initial recommendation. And those are going to be our roofing categories and our metal studs and drywall categories. Those 2 we didn't get sufficient bids to open. And then the third one is at Randolph. There's a paint category there. The conditions there are very difficult. Everybody on the construction team is really doing a lot of due diligence really to make sure that we recommend the right person, that person's got the right credentials and the right prep included to make sure that when they go to paint the job, it's really done satisfactorily. So what that really means is of the 1.3 that we're projecting to be over here, when we come back with the rebid work, we think that this number will be roughly about 1.75 or 1.8 million over our initial estimates. We have our CM fees again with McCarthy and Smith. Construction contingencies, I think it was pointed out earlier, in past years we've been carrying 10%. Given the large returns, we didn't feel it was necessary to hold such a percent, and we narrowed that down to 8% contingency. So I guess conversely, we probably won't expect as much back next year, but we think this is a more reasonable approach this year given where we are with the budgets as well. The other thing to point out too, I guess, is, you know, we are doing 3 schools again, but in terms of square footages, that we are doing about 12,000 more square feet of renovations this year. And even at the same price point, we'd expect the numbers to go up a little bit from last year as well.
The other thing that I would mention is back in November when we had given the DD presentation and kind of walked through the timelines and the budgets, we had mentioned excuse me, that the design development estimate at that time was about 18% higher than what the budget was. I think we were up at almost $9.8 million is where the estimate had come in at. So we had anticipated that we'd be over budget. We weren't sure exactly how much. We were optimistic that we might time the market a little bit better and that we'd get good coverage, which we did. But we've known for a while that these projects were going to come in over. It was just a matter really of how much, and that's kind of where we're at today, is pretty close to what that budget estimate that McCarthy and Smith had put together was. So, from the first summer through to the second summer and the third summer, we try to be very consistent with the scope. In some cases, the budgets have already been set up originally to deal with that scope. In some cases, maybe they were a little bit lighter than we would have liked. But we kind of are where we are. It's one of the reasons we saved our money the first year when we were under budget and put it back into the contingency fund to make sure that when we got to this point, we'd have enough money to deal with it. So.
A lot of the rest of the packet really is just some of the details of the individual subcontractors that we're recommending. In some cases, we took combined bids. We tried, as well as McCarthy Smith, tried to package things so that they were appealing to bidders. And in some cases where the scope was small, we may have looked to combine bids between the 3 schools to encourage bidder support. In other cases, we may have broken different trades out and awarded and recommended a contract at each school, specifically the larger ones, mechanical, electrical. Those would all be per school. And then in section 4, really is kind of the same accounting. And at this time, we did bid out a lot of alternate work, but we aren't, through discussions with the team, and given where we were at with the bond budgets, we didn't feel it prudent at this time to go ahead and recommend any. There's one in particular we're still considering, and that would be the locker alternate at Randolph, but that's open to more discussion internally. And, so at this time, we're not bringing any alternates to the table for recommendation. But if you do go to that, the 11 by 17 sheets, if you go to the last sheet, that will have an itemization of the alternates. They were consistent for the most part from school to school. And we can certainly spend any amount of time answering questions specific to those as well.
I think a big piece was mechanical, which we have been consistent with some of the mechanical work, that if it's working today, in the media centers, is that correct? And correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Nope,
that
that's right.
we would defer that until we had to do it, the work. So it's not, we're not losing efficiencies by doing that. It's not like if we did the work today, it would just be so much more savings than if we do it in the future. So some of these alternates, as we have in the past, if we get to the end of the bond, and there will be some proceeds left, we'll, begin to prioritize those and decide what are the most important projects to do at that time.
Yep, some of those projects could become sinking fund projects or something along those lines as well.
And again, we will revisit the lockers at Randolph to see if that makes sense.
And that would be a standalone contract too. There was no other locker work on any of the other schools.
Okay, questions? Mr. Center.
I see a lot of, for the alternatives, I see a lot of glass and glazing. What would those alternatives be? It looks like they were going to be at all 3 schools. So I was just curious what we were thinking there before.
No, I think those are.
Those are the awarded, I'm sorry.
One more. Those are windows.
Got it.
The ones awarded are windows.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the alternates, we had mechanical alternates at the 3 media centers. We had a terrazzo patching alternate at, I believe, at Grant. We had a fascia alternate that we had looked at Hoover. We also had some panels. We were looking at bricking over at Randolph. Those stone panels or faux stone panels on the outside of the building. So there was a lot of different things that, when we first looked at the scope of the project, we were optimistic we'd be able to do. And as the budget estimates came in, we started to think these must or might want to become alternates, and obviously the bids didn't come in a place where we can accept them, so.
Right, they're not critical, and the interior work of those schools will be the same as all of our other schools, so.
Right.
And Paul has been looking at some alternates to deal with that stone at Randolph, so to see if there's some other options that are more affordable, so we may bring that back to you at some future point.
These are a lot of some of the aesthetic things that might have been nice to haves, but we were clear that the initial focus of the board was the must-haves and the essential items. A number of these, again, are things that we looked at a number of different options when we were out there, unique to each of the schools. But again, many of those are primarily aesthetic additions.
Now, I remember at Randolph, there was some discussion about maybe doing some sort of canopy that the school requested. Is that something that is still in the scope, or was that eliminated?
The front entrance?
Actually, we are moving the office at that building out of the lobby area into the staff, where the staff lounge is now, and that will get a small canopy.
Okay.
The larger canopy that we had probably showed you at DD, we scaled that back into something more affordable. So.
Sure.
But I think their current canopy will stay.
The current canopy remains. And
And that's a very long entrance
And there will be a new arch in front of the existing new, well, I guess will be the new entrance to the main office. So.
Okay.
That'll be up closer to the sidewalk, if you can picture the long entrance into Randolph, and then this will be up closer to the front of the building.
Correct.
Mrs. Benefit.
With the Randolph, you talk about the lockers. I know a few years ago, we replaced a lot of the lockers because of fire safety hazard, correct? With all the coats hanging in the hallway that the fire safety required us, or we had to do something with the
They
lockers.
either have to take it in the classroom or
So,
lockers.
is that a question? I mean, with Randolph, is that part of the question? I mean, they still have the empty hallway, or the coats hanging in the hall, so we have some fire safety issues there.
Right. We need to go back and look at the placement of where those lockers can go. If you can picture the back of Randolph with their very large media center. I wish I had their drawing kind of going through the center of the school. It's a function of making sure that they'll be functional and that we can find a placement for all their needs.
Okay.
Doesn't run in the same hallway pattern as many of our schools
Right.
do.
Okay.
And so the feasibility of putting those along that media center looks a little different than in the schools where we put them in the hallway adjacent to all of the classrooms.
Right, so there's classrooms on either side and you put the lockers down, whereas here you've got, classrooms on the outside of the media center, so there isn't another hallway there.
Okay.
We're still working with
Yeah,
that,
we're
because
working through it.
At this point, this is, the remaining K-4 schools do have that.
Yeah.
Capacity.
Okay.
And it's really a matter of, are we able to put the functionality of where we could place those in the school, or some alternate options.
Okay, thank you.
President Burdick.
So we're looking at realistically this project, this portion of the project, it's going to be 1.7 to 1.8 billion over budget. I know we came in well the first year or two with contingency, and we were able to bank extra. I don't remember what that total was that we were able to bank. Do you?
I do. Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
Either way. I'm not implying you can spend all of it, because I know we can't do that. We're not at the end of the bond yet. But what do we have in that bank that we can work with?
So we would say that we have about $4.5 million today. And what that's comprised of is what we have, originally put in the bank, some of what we've used, the board's commitment to use $2.5 million of sinking fund for Franklin, as well as then the approximately $900,000 from last summer's projects that you saw this evening that we'll put back into contingency. So those items together about $4.5 million.
Okay.
So we're looking to use about 1.8 of that for these projects. Assuming, we're still comfortable with, the board did approve $2.5 million of sinking funds. So right now, if Paul looked at those numbers, like on a ledger item, he'd show it less because he's put the full Franklin budget in his numbers, but the board made a commitment to use $2.5 million of sinking funds. So at some future point, we'll see that accounting reconciliation in our budgets. Either we'll show sinking fund and owners and bond together, or some other format that shows that separation, but.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Are we looking to update the budget then for the next 2 3 years to sort of meet the updated landscape of the economics.
Yeah, so that's what Paul and I are committed to do right now as we get through kind of a good price square foot and then extend that out to the remaining square feet that we have to have done, yes. And we'll bring that to you.
Yep, it'll help too when we have the next series of bonds sold, then we'll know what the closing costs are. That'll help us adjust some of those numbers.
Okay.
We've got some other, furniture budgets and things like that we're trying to make sure are adequate to do the scope that's,
Sure.
That's been promised as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts, but we're getting pretty close to having it nailed down.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, regular agenda.
Correct, yes, sir. Please.
And President Burton, that concludes building and site.
Thank you.
If I could just, I would like to thank the project team that worked on all of this, French Associates, and obviously Steve Banchero's here with McCarthy and Smith. They spent a ton of hours coordinating everything with the abatement firms, with the architectural firms. As Scott mentioned, trying to figure out the best way to package it, and the timing of putting it on the street, and then obviously all the post-bid interviews and vetting everyone out. So they've done a great job, and we're very happy with how things have turned out. So.
And I want to thank Plant Moran again for putting together our binders and presenting that information in an understandable and easy to follow fashion. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Again, we'll offer the same. We received a lot of information. If there's any questions that you have, please don't hesitate to get those to us. If you have them before Thursday, I'll include that response in your packet. If you have it post that time, we'd be happy to give you a call or email.
And as always, if we do have questions, if you could copy the whole board on them, that would be very helpful. Excuse me. As our board is very aware, we will not be replying all back and forth, but as far as we know what the question is, we know what the answer is. So everyone has the same information. The next item on our agenda is, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
We really appreciate all the efforts. The next item on our agenda is item 4, personnel, and I'll be turning it over to Mr. Centers as the chair.
Thank you. Tonight we will be discussing something we started at our study session of last week, and that is the contract of our superintendent, who we're very happy to have offered a contract to. We voted to offer a contract to. So tonight we'll be further discussing the contract that we began discussing last week. Part of that contract is very, very similar. In fact, a majority of that contract is very, very similar to what our previous superintendent, Dr. Leopa, has been working under for a number of years. We asked Mr. Winery and our consultant at Michigan Leadership Institute, Mike Wilmot, to review that contract, both for its appropriateness in compared to other school districts around the area, and also review it to be in accordance with updated laws that are now in effect that may have changed. There's one area that we were discussing changing, and that is at the very beginning of the contract. And Mr. Winery, would you be so kind to kind of discuss what we may change, an alternative to this contract? We've got two options here. It's not a significant change to the contract, but may be a little different in how we procedurally renew our superintendent every year.
Be happy to. If you look at the draft of the agreement, under item number 1, there's 2 item number 1s under this draft. They're really options. We can only adopt one of those 2. The second item number 1 really provides for the same term with the same type of language that we had in the predecessor superintendent employment agreement. And that basically says that we have a term starting on this date and ending on this date. In this particular case, it'd be 3.5 years. It'd be January of this year, presumably, through June 30th of 2019. And that would be the term unless the termination date is extended by additional incremental periods, which means as we go forward, in order to maintain a 3-year agreement, each year the board would have to take an affirmative action or an affirmative vote in order to extend that agreement, in order to make sure we have an ongoing 3-year agreement. The first option is similar, except instead of requiring an affirmative vote by the board to roll over that contract an additional year, it's approached just a little bit different. And the language reads, on or before April 1st of 2017, and each April 1st thereafter, the board will formally advise the superintendent if the school district is not going to extend this employment agreement for an additional 1 year. In the event the board fails to notify the superintendent on or before April 1st of each April 1st thereafter that is not going to extend the contract shall automatically be extended. So in this case, it would be up to the board to notify the superintendent that they are not going to renew or roll over, I shouldn't say renew, but roll forward an additional year that employment agreement. The board needs no particular reason to do that. It doesn't require cause. It just requires formal notification by the board. That would come in the form, presumably, of a discussion by the board and then a written notice to the superintendent. What it does is a couple things. If you were to adopt the alternative, which is the first item number 1, it's intended to provide some stability to the school district. As we know from our recent experience, the superintendent market is a shallow market at this time. We are aware through our consultant that other searches have not provided an abundance of candidates, and I think we're very fortunate, I think we all agree, that we were able to have Andre Oquist come forward and be willing to assume our position here for Livonia Schools. Very frankly, in my view, Mrs. Oquist would be very, very marketable outside of the district. And a provision like this provides Livonia Schools with a certain amount of stability. At the same time, if you are in the position of the superintendent, this provides the superintendent with a reasonable amount of job stability. And so I think that there's something for both parties. It is not an uncommon provision to have in an employment agreement for an executive, and not in the public or private sector for that matter. So that's kind of the basic differences between those two provisions. It's just the manner in which that contract would be rolled forward.
Any questions or discussion, comments? Mrs. Burton.
I am in favor of going with the first option of the board needing to take action if we are intending not to roll over an additional year on the contract for a few reasons. Number one, I think it's important that we send a message that we are looking for a long-term commitment to our superintendent. That's something that our district has, for the most part, been able to enjoy for a long period of time. Mrs. Oquist will be our 10th superintendent, and many of these folks have served for 10 years, some more than that. I am not interested in a short-term superintendent for our district. I don't think that that's healthy for our district, and I think it's important that our board send a message to our superintendent and our community that we're looking for this to be a long-term commitment. It's important to note that if this did roll over for an additional year by the board allowing that to happen, that does not make any change in dollars or benefits. That would absolutely have to come before the board for any change in any of the provisions of the contract at all. The second main reason that I really want to do this is that I don't want us to slip into an accidental situation whereby, with the busyness of board life, it slips by us to go ahead and extend that contract an additional year. That has happened while I was on the board, where In the busyness of everything that was going on, we simply forgot to take care of that, and all of a sudden realized we had gone down from what our intention was with a 3-year contract to a 2-year contract. And we had to go ahead and deal with that, take care of that in open meetings and so forth. But I don't think that that's healthy for either the superintendent or the district to have that happen, and especially if it's very unintentional. So for both of those reasons, I am in favor of going with the first option of having this being a rollover or evergreen type of a contract where the board would need to take action to let the superintendent know that we are not intending for that to happen any longer.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. Similar to what President Burton said, the automatic rollover option, I think, represents us better because it eliminates the potential for an inadvertent miscommunication. And if that had not already happened to us once, we wouldn't have to think about this. But we found out how easy that is to have such a thing happen. And because we have such a stellar superintendent, I would hate to give her the wrong impression to think that she should start looking elsewhere. God forbid.
Anyone else? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Like my colleagues, I favor option number 1. I think it does 2 things. I think it creates stability in our superintendent, and it also then requires affirmative action on the board if we don't want to do that, as opposed to affirmative action if we want to extend it. And I like that option better. Again, it gives more stability to the superintendent, and if for some reason something did occur where we perhaps voted not to extend that, it gives the superintendent enough time to begin the process of looking elsewhere if need be. And I like to have as much lead time as possible. So I think it creates that stability, and I've always felt that if you're going to discontinue something, it requires affirmative action as opposed to the other way around. Because as Mrs. Jarvis said, we don't then fall inadvertently into inaction, which results in perhaps a result that we didn't intend.
Anyone else?
I have a question, and not to say Mrs. Oakley is going to do anything illegal or immoral. However, what protections does the board and the school district have? I know I've read the provisions as far as the moral obligations of the superintendent and such, but what do we have as far as protection goes, so the public knows and the board is reassured that we have in place to protect ourselves from any financial issues or anything of that nature going forward? I mean, if we've got a rolling 3-year contract and something happens today and we have 3 more years down the road before the contract is expired, what are our obligations financially?
That's a good question. A couple of things. First, it requires no cause whatsoever for the board to notify the superintendent that it is not going to be extended. That can be done for any reason. So that's one protection. Second one would be under item 13, which on the current draft that you have is on page 4, and that allows the district to terminate this agreement without liability hereunder for salary and/or fringe benefits for cause. And then that provision goes on to elaborate a little bit on what might include cause, which are acts or omissions constituting cause, and it includes things such as moral turpitude, misconduct, etc. And it isn't limited to those items, but it gives some example of what might be considered. So at any time during the agreement, even if it were right after that period, right after April 1st, it could be April 2nd, where that would be rolled forward. If there is cause, the board can act. This does not compromise the board's ability to act.
Mrs. Burton.
Along the lines of what Mr. Wintery just stated, for those who don't have this contract in front of them, this section 13 reads as far as if she violates any terms or covenants of this agreement. Right above the terms and covenants of this agreement in section 12 is that the individual is qualified to serve as superintendent, that she performs the duties for which she's hired, that she possesses the skill and knowledge to enable her to do so, and that she performs the duties in accordance with the law and with such care and skill as is necessary to prevent injury to the property, goodwill, and the interest of the district. So it is pretty broad, that if things are going on that are not in accordance with the behavior of our superintendent as we see fit, we have cause. It's a very good question.
If I can add, Mr. Senator, there's a number of protections without regurgitating the full agreement. There's a number of protections for the board. Item 14 indicates that if for any reason the superintendent would breach this agreement and the board did not act upon it, the board, that does not create precedent, and the board can act on any future breach in the agreement. Each of the provisions as we go forward in the contract provides for additional assurances that are all designed to protect the Board of Education.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
I think there's probably two situations where we may ever decide not to roll the contract over, and I think one of those may be a retirement situation where that has become clear. The other situation is if for some reason we have a situation where something has gone astray, and I think the least of our worries at that point is going to be have a third year tacked on to that contract. The writing is going to be on the wall way before we ever get to an issue with not renewing the contract via evaluations or litigation or whatever the terms come up. I think on the list of things that could go wrong in terminating a superintendent, that third year on the contract is going to be way on the bottom of our list. I think there's a lot of other stuff. So for me, personally, I think we made a great choice in hiring our superintendent, and I want to be very clear to our superintendent and to our community that we feel we made the right choice, and we have no doubt about that.
Anyone else? I would just like to say that, one, kind of reflecting on Mrs. Burton's point, research has shown us that having a long-term superintendent in place increases the effectiveness of that superintendent. There are many provisions in this contract, Mr. Wintery just cited a couple of them, that make it very advantageous for the district. I think this is advantageous for the district as well, but it also gives Mrs. Oquist a little peace of mind that we are committed to her for the long term. Along with that, I thank you, Mrs. McDonald, for asking the question about dismissal. And I think it's very clear that if something were to happen out of character for the superintendent, we still have right to terminate the contract if that were the case. And finally, if someone were to appear at this contract, there are 3 steps in this contract as far as the salary goes. Last week we had discussed, and Mrs. Oquist generously pointed out that she does not intend to take steps unless the employees are taking steps. However, they are here in the contract should employees get the steps and Mrs. Oquist decides to accept those steps. But we heard about the sacrifice of a lot of our district employees earlier in public comments. And I just wanted to say it's a credit to Mrs. Oquist to acknowledge those sacrifices and be in step with those employees. So I too would support provision 1. And Mr. Winter.
One more thing that hasn't been mentioned, I think is germane, and that is that if the board chose to adopt that provision, not only do we not give up the for cause provision, we don't give up the ability to not roll it forward, but the contract also provides for annual evaluations, and that's pretty important for the public to know. Every year, the superintendent will be evaluated.
Mrs. Laura.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Mr. Wintery, correct me if I'm wrong, but this first provision is not uncommon on a lot of district contracts, correct?
It is not uncommon.
Right. And I just think it sends a positive note to start this assignment, and there isn't a better way but to be positive about the whole situation.
Anyone, anything else? Mrs. Burton.
I've been asked by a couple people in the community, not about this, the choice between the two section 1s, but rather if our new superintendent will be starting off at the same salary as our old superintendent. While the majority of the bones of the contract are the same, there are, the short answer to that is no. And that is because this contract does contain a provision for a doctorate degree. It contains a provision for longevity in the position itself, not with the district, because heaven knows Mrs. Oquist has been with the district for a long, long time, but longevity in the position of superintendent. And provision for effective or highly effective reviews in the position. So the short answer to that question is no. The contract allows provisions for getting to the level of our previous superintendent, but it does not. It would not exist today.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. I know I've been on the fence about this, just because I wasn't sure as far as the liabilities and the concern in reference to, okay, you've got a superintendent, you tell them that you don't want them anymore, not to say that we don't want you, Mrs. Oquist, but, are you going to have angst for 3 years? So, which I don't think we're going to have that issue with Superintendent Oquist, so, under those circumstances and with the stopgap, I think we'll all be fine with the first choice, with the rollover, and the board is just going to have to take charge if there's a problem and to make sure that we do our job, right? And Mrs. Oquist, I know she'll do her job quite well.
You have my word.
So, I know. So that's it.
Going once?
No.
Okay, back to Mrs. Burton. Thank you.
Yes, so this will be on the
regular agenda.
Right, this will be on the regular agenda next.
Are we sure we want that on the regular?
Yes, I think we have to put it on the regular agenda.
And once again, we are thrilled with our choice of superintendent. Absolutely thrilled and very grateful. We've seen communities right in our backyard who find themselves in the middle of a year yet again without a superintendent. And it needs to be known that in Wayne County itself, an average longevity of a superintendent is 3 to 4 years. We need to know how blessed we are in Livonia that we have had long-term leadership, and I'm looking forward to long-term leadership with Mrs. Oquist also, very much so.
Thank you. I couldn't be more proud to lead our district and feel very privileged to be serving in this role, so thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item 5, Committee of the Whole, discussion of officers. It is in our policies and procedures that we elect officers at the first regular meeting of January each year. That will be at our next meeting, which will be a week from tomorrow, or Tuesday the 19th. We had some preliminary discussion at our study session.
at a previous study session about this. I believe it was the December study session. But wanted to know what the thoughts were of the board going forward for preparations for officer discussions. Mr. Centers.
If I recall correctly, when we discussed at the study session, it seemed like there was a consensus of the board that everyone was comfortable having the officers that are in place right now stay for another year, so that they can develop a little bit more continuity now that people have learned their positions and have had some experience, taking the second year to really kind of thrive in that role. I would support that, sending another year, with the status quo. And I think all of our officers have done a really nice job. So thank you, all three of you.
Thank you. Other thoughts on officer positions for the coming year? Mr. Johnson.
I would echo Mr. Center's thought. I think I'm in the unique position of the only one at the table that had the same office for 2 years. And I can tell you that it does take your first year to get your feet wet, to understand your role, understand what is expected of you. And I think you only become effective in your second year. So I think it's a good idea, at least with this group, that we maintain the officers that we have at the present time.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. Again, I echo my colleagues that a 2-year officer, a second-year officer is more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more valuable. But I'd like to add the caveat that if the officer does not wish to serve a second term, that they have the option to not do so.
Excellent point.
Questions or comments? And then I will ask every question. Mrs. Bonnefield and Mrs. Laura, are you interested in serving a second year on your respective offices?
Yes, President Burton, I'm good to go.
Okay. Mrs. Laura?
I am also having the experience way back in the 90s, as I stated before, of being the president for 1 year, because that seemed to be the trend for our board at that time. And I suggested last month when we were talking about that as just as Mr. Johnson did that, I thought it was an excellent recommendation to continue a second year, because that's when you can really put your knowledge to use.
Okay, definitely.
So I would be very honored to serve as vice president again for this coming year.
Likewise, I would be happy to serve as president for the coming year if that's how my board chooses to place positions. If someone else wanted to serve in that manner, I'm not opposed to that. But if this is what the board wishes, I'm fine with that. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, officer votes will go on the agenda then, on the regular agenda for next week's meeting on Tuesday. I would like to thank our employees who have consistently over this current school year done a noticeable job of being present at board meetings, of paying attention to what's going on. It's gratifying when we each try to go to one another's activities and learn more about what's going on, attending activities in the school, visiting classrooms, et cetera, and likewise attending board meetings and so forth. I would hope that our employees know that they are very appreciated by this Board of Education. Along that line, education continues to be under besiege in the state of Michigan. And it continued over the last few weeks with yet another assault on the ability of public education's ability to get our message and our word out on important issues. I strongly encourage every member of this community, be they employees, board members, parents, business owners, to continue to contact Lansing to properly fund education so that we can properly fund
all of the activities, employees, and needs of our entire public school district. I cannot encourage every one of us more, and I put myself on that list also. Lansing simply has got to understand that public education is not adequately funded. And I encourage you to continue to get that message out. The next budget session for Lansing is coming up within this next month. It is the time right now to contact our legislators and let them know that public education has got to be properly funded. Pensions continue to rise, we know that, but public education is a constitutional requirement, and it's got to be funded properly. In 1993, Proposal A stated that we send our money to Lansing, they would properly fund education. That happened for many years, and it's not happening now. And we need to get the message to Lansing that public education deserves proper funding, and our employees deserve proper funding. Is there anything else? I don't have anything else on the agenda. Is there anything else another board member would like to add? Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. I just wanted to let the community know and to commend my fellow board members who attended the school finance and law workshop this past Saturday. It was a full day with many workshops and lots of learning that went on, good information, and it was a full day. We were there for 8 hours. So kudos to my colleagues, and just so that the committee knows and the community knows that we are working very hard on their behalf and on behalf of our children.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other comments from board members? Seeing as we're at the end of our agenda, we are now adjourned. Have a nice evening. Good night.